Thank you for joining the Sustainable Angle for the New Textiles Horizons through Regenerative Practices discussion panel. First, we'll look at some materials that exemplify what we mean by regenerative practices. So these beautiful leathers are from white oak pastures, and they are the product of regenerative land management practices, and this was begun by this particular supplier in the mid-1990s. And they're also part of the Savoury Global Hub since 2016. And so what they do from a regenerative practices point of view, it's very focused upon the place of animals in fertilising the land and bringing soil health back. They rotate animal species. They also have high animal welfare and are USDA certified. Later on in the discussion, we're going to be hearing from this supplier. They're the largest woolen spinner in the world. These are the products from UPW, and they have very, very high standards as regard regenerative practices and animal welfare. So they are very proactive in promoting and supporting high animal welfare standards through whether it be cashmere and those practices, whether it be wool through the responsible wool standard, or even yak fibre. We're also going to be hearing from Clerici Tessuto. So they are a silk producer in Como in Italy, producing beautiful silk qualities here, all completely GOTS certified. A great variety of weaves and techniques, everything from chiffons, georgettes to plissés, and they are constantly striving towards better practices right the way throughout their supply chain, from the silk cocoons right the way through the processes. And these are the products from an amazing new material innovation. It's actually revisiting a historic fibre source, and that's the abaca plant, relative of the banana. And in the search for new qualities, more durable and technological qualities, led the creators of this material, Bananatex, to work in conjunction with a paper mill. So this actual material is grown in a permaculture in a regenerative manner that we're going to be hearing more about from the Bananatex creator. This is another example. So as you can see, a range of colours, and they also have different weights and a very durable weave. And some of them are actually also coated with a natural wax coating. And now let's learn more about these suppliers and these regenerative practices that I've been talking about. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Amanda, the curator from the Sustainable Angle, and today we have got an absolutely amazing panel, delighted to welcome them, and we're going to be exploring new textiles horizons through regenerative practices. And today I'm going to be joined from panelists all over the world, so really delighted to be able to welcome Katrina, ole-MoiYoi, and she is a sustainable sourcing specialist from Kering in Paris. We have Vittoria Bionda, who is the marketing and salesperson from Clerici Tessuto in Como, Italy. And from UPW, we have Kwan Lieu. She is the marketing manager, and she's in Hong Kong, so it's evening time for her. And we are also joined by Hannes Schönegger. He's the co-founder and CEO of a brand new materials development called Bananatex, and also an accessories brand that uses that very material. So this panel discussion is going to explore the critical issues around environmental degradation, climate change and biodiversity loss. Through our conversation, we'll highlight how fashion can have the power to support positive impacts through our sourcing materials practices. So we want to be sourcing them from nature-based solutions. and how those solutions have a place in restoring natural systems that can act as carbon sinks. Through this discussion, we're going to explore what regenerative practices mean in relation to raw material sources that the panelists work with specifically in their work. So regenerative agriculture is a really important part of the work that we do here at Sustainable Angle. And we, at our last expo in January in London, we had a huge display around this very specific topic. And so it's defined as a system of alternative farming practices that leverage the power of plants to keep carbon in the soil, acting as a carbon sequestration. And they increase the capacity of soils also to hold water, enhance the resilience of crops, and while reducing excessive inputs of synthetic agrochemicals. And in turn, supporting the livelihoods of farmers, very importantly, and regaining the nutrient density of food and the quality of crops that we produce in these systems. So, first of all, I'm going to welcome Katrina. Thank you so much for joining us. And really, I want to turn to you and your work for Kering. Can you first of all, I mean, I've defined regenerative agriculture, but can you describe what regenerative farming or herding practices actually are?
Sure. And firstly, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here. And I think that that was actually a really helpful framing of regenerative agriculture. I know that a lot of people have heard the term, but don't necessarily know what it means in a very practical sense. So, so I think if we take a step backward for a second, actually, and we think about, let's take the luxury fashion industry. Now, luxury fashion, as opposed to, let's say, fast fashion, is really reliant upon natural raw materials, so not synthetic ones. We're talking about wool, cotton, cashmere, and leather, of course. And so what that means is that even though we're in the fashion space, we're very reliant upon farming and herding and agriculture. And so if we take a practical example and we look at cattle, so leather, what does that mean? Well, I think when most people think about cattle farming, they think about intensive feedlots. And so regenerative grazing really takes cows out of these types of systems and puts them into natural pastures. And then there's a very deliberate approach to what we call planned grazing. And so your farmer, your herder will take those animals and move them around the system in a very deliberate way that allows the grasses and all the other vegetation to recover as the animals move through. And so one of the ways in which it's quite different than free range farming is that it's deliberate, as I've mentioned. And so, yeah, I think that's the case of that's cattle in a nutshell. And I'm happy to talk about other systems
Sure.
maybe later.
So generally, how do these regenerative systems benefit the environment? I just touched on carbon sequestration, but obviously it's quite a complex issue, and people are sort of like, how does that happen? Can you sort of shell that for us?
Absolutely. So I think at the heart of regenerative agriculture is really this question of soil. So what's happening with the soils? What are the practices that are being put in place? And how does it benefit the soil? And so if we go back to the example of cows, and you're moving the cows across a pasture, that allows, as I mentioned, vegetation to recover. And as it recovers, or even isn't necessarily overgrazed in the first place, you have basically like a skin on top of the soil. And that allows soil to hold carbon in, as opposed to a place like a feedlot where you have bare soils, and so you have carbon leaving the system. And so you're also preventing erosion. The soils have the ability to hold onto water better, and so on. And so for this reason, people are really excited about the potential of regenerative agriculture to play a really important role in the fight against climate change.
Amazing. That was super clear. Thank you so much. And how do these practices, because we understand, you know, I think it's surfaced very much in news media now, the critical position we are in with biodiversity loss, which is related directly to our activities, obviously. So what place do regenerative practices specifically play in supporting biodiversity?
Yeah, so at Kering and across the world, people really think about it both in terms of biodiversity on the farm, as well as biodiversity in the wider ecosystem. So if we start with what's happening on the farm, as I mentioned, there's this big focus on soil. Now, soil is obviously it's not this dead thing. And in fact, I think some people might be surprised to learn that soil is actually home to about, I think it's about a quarter of all living species on Earth. So it's this, vastly rich system. And by introducing these regenerative practices, you are protecting the soils, you're protecting the biodiversity that lives within them, which of course is responsible for sustaining life on the planet as we know it. As you mentioned, producing food and fiber and so on. So that's the sort of in the soil. If you go one step beyond that, you also mentioned that regenerative agriculture it typically does not allow for the use of harmful synthetic inputs like pesticides and herbicides and so on, and which means that you allow insects, bees, and other pollinators to thrive. And then if you go even further afield, by not using those harmful inputs, you are also protecting much wider ecosystems that are oftentimes off the farm. And so, you're talking about forests that sometimes come up to the farm edge, but you're also talking about all of the plant and animal species in the area.
Okay, so it would be really great actually to hear about your work with Kering and what you're doing. Just any example that you think exemplifies these sort of principles that you've been talking about in practice.
Sure. Yeah, so actually in July of this year, we were really excited to release our biodiversity strategy. Of course, we've been working on biodiversity for many years now, but through the strategy, we really sort of pulled it all together and set out a really ambitious direction about where we want to go. We committed to help convert 1 million hectares around the world into regenerative farming practices, and with a real focus on cotton and cashmere, wool and leather. And so, yeah, we have a lot of projects that are ongoing. I think some of the really exciting ones include our project in Mongolia, which is looking at better practices, better grazing practices for the goats that make the beautiful cashmere that ends up in our brands and in our products. And yeah, so I'd invite listeners to maybe check out the website. There's some beautiful videos of that project and what it looks like on the ground.
There's a great lead in, obviously, to our next panelist with some of the things you were just saying, but also something that I would really interested from a fashion industry perspective is, are these practices, first of all, feasible at scale and how quickly could we roll them out?
Mm-hmm.
And also, how receptive are the brands under the Kering umbrella to understanding what we're talking about right now and incorporating these materials? So how's that sort of going? Where are we at in implementation?
Yeah, no, great question. So just quickly, yes, these practices are definitely feasible at scale. And I would say that there are more and more organizations and partners that are getting into the field now. For us, one of the really critical ones is the Savory Institute. And they're often considered basically, the pioneer of regenerative agriculture. And they help make a really critical link between, farmers who are using regenerative practices and brands. The supply chains are long, and so it's not an easy process, and you really need partners on the ground like Savory. And so, as I mentioned before, we have this commitment now to transform 1 million hectares of land into regenerative. And so we've launched a fund to do that. And starting in early 2021, we'll start providing grants to individuals, to farmer groups and businesses all around the world who are making that shift. So we've seen it, succeed at pilot level. We've seen it start to scale. And so through the fund, we really want to kickstart and speed up that transition.
Amazing. Right. Okay. So that was a very large yes for, we're really going to leverage some serious change starting from next year. But 1 million hectares is like, I don't even know how to understand that amount, but it's
not a small amount of land. Yeah.
Hugely significant. So incredible. And that provides a beautiful segue into a conversation now with Kwan from UPW, and delighted to have you here and to see you again, Kwan. So we know that UPW is sort of a huge spinner, I think the largest in the world, and dealing with so many different fibers, but we're going to just shine a spotlight on those animal fibers that Katrina was talking about earlier. Can you just give us a quick overview of your of UPW's perspective on responsible practices for a start, and then we'll dig into sort of specific projects that you've got going on.
Sure, absolutely. Just to clarify, so we're the largest woolen spinner, and we do focus on and also semi-worsted and fancy. We have those yarns as well. For our sourcing practices, it's important that we do source responsibly and that we start at the raw material level. I think now the fashion industry is really becoming more rooted and in understanding the importance of raw materials. And you have Kering's EPL now report, Textile Exchange's preferred fiber materials report, and then of course TSA's material index. And that helps brands and suppliers as well anchor how we think about materials, to categorize it and to think more thoughtfully about it. And for UPW, it's looking at lowering greenhouse gases, environmental burden, impact, and accelerating our sustainability initiatives. And I think regenerative practices is one of the biggest topics and one of the key challenges that we're going to have to tackle in this decade. And for regenerative practices, UPW focuses on sourcing regenerative farming and regenerative grazing. And so for regenerative farming, it's primarily with organic cotton, and we've transitioned over 30% of our yarns, and we are working hard to accelerate that at an even quicker pace. And Katrina covered it very well when she talked about the benefits of soil health and in particular organic cotton. So one thing I can elaborate a bit more is perhaps on the side of regenerative grazing. And that looks at supporting the farmers that are under the animal welfare standard to map out the areas that they are that they're operating in, whether it is nomadic in Mongolia or more the farming style in Inner Mongolia. So the first is it's mapping and then rotating the animals from area to area, and then allowing it to rest and to restore at its basic level. And it is really key because SFA said it quite well in a very simple way. Happy rangelands equals happy animals. They're very dependent on one another because the animals are eating the grass as a primary source of food or forage. And when you have overgrazing, then that directly impacts the livelihoods of the animals, and the overgrazing of the animals in one particular area impacts the land and the soil and its ability to sequester the greenhouse gases. So it's all very interrelated.
Absolutely. We're talking a lot at Sustainable Angle using that kind of language, interdependencies, interrelationships, etc., for people to really understand. I think our supply chains, as Katrina pointed out, so long and often very complex sort of webs around the world. And I think it is really critical that in order that we do understand these things, in order to make those best practice choices. And so I know you just mentioned before, you're very involved as an organization with the Sustainable Fiber Alliance. Can you tell us what that is, what its aims are, and how you're involved with them?
Sure. So SFA is one of our partners. We're members of the group, and they're working on actually a pilot this year where they are certifying the farmers as well as certifying the clean processing facilities. And so you have a very nice seamless story where it's about animal welfare, it's about rangeland stewardship, and it's also about processing it along the entire supply chain in a clean manner. SFA, they've done really wonderful work, and I think the way that they approach it is very impactful, working with people who are on the ground and have access and understand the cultural context to be able to localize these trainings. And they take an adaptive approach, which means they have multiple tiers. So this is also in the works. and they have like bronze, silver, and gold. And for the bronze level is for them to participate in the trainings and to build their knowledge. On the silver level, it's that they comply with a fraction of the requirements. And for the areas where they do fall short, they have to map out their plan over the next couple of years. And each year they select one cause and area to focus on. And then for the gold is they meet all the requirements and they get audited every 2 years. But this is a really, I think, strategic and powerful approach, because you involve anyone who wants to be part of it and who is willing to learn. And you make it realistic and possible for them to make this transition, because it's not easy. It's a lot of education, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of finances. And so I'm personally very passionate about the work that they are doing, and they're bringing together a lot of players, brands, suppliers, and the local herders to be able to do this in a very coordinated approach and to better understand one another's realities.
Yeah, amazing. So it sounds that, there's lots of kind of themes coming around there about how you manage to get to optimum kind of regenerative practices, and a lot of players involved. And so that it seems to me like this is going to be a sort of a future of joining up dots and sharing and collaborations between all of these different players that you just spoke about. And when we were talking yesterday, I was so interested to hear about the roundtable that Textile Exchange had organized, and this just sounded fantastic. We were speaking earlier about how we're from all over the world and we can all connect and all speak, technology allowing. But you were involved in something even more extraordinary than this. So when we talk about, we as an organization wish we could be on the ground a lot of the time, we're speaking about stuff that we don't get the chance to see. But you got an insight from some herders through this roundtable. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was wonderful to be part of it. So Textile Exchange organized it, and it was giving the opportunity to a group. It's actually quite intimate. I think there's 15 of us. And I think Katrina was part of the call as well. It was to meet the local herders in Mongolia, and for us to be able to ask our questions. And there was a translator to help facilitate it, but just to hear their stories, their struggles, and to share our encouragement from the supplier and brand side. Yeah, and I think a particular story that I want to share that came out of that conversation is just realizing that this year has been incredibly tough for them, and it is not just because of COVID. That's definitely a factor in terms of the market demand, but they also have had a drought, and they've had to all decrease the size of the herds. And because of the drought, there's not enough, it's affected their finances, but also there's not enough food for the goats. So I think the number they said was that for every goat that they sold, that money was enough to cover feed for one goat for the winter. And so it helps, I think, for us to understand where they're coming from and the realities of climate change affecting them as well. And it also shed light on the importance of impact incentives to be able to support these herders as they journey to their process in becoming more sustainable. And actually, the group that we met with was on the bronze level. So they're on the first step in making their transition, and talking about challenges of even having clean water access for in those areas, or even getting water to them. And so it was very intimate, and conversations like that are important, and we're blessed that we could be part of it.
Fantastic. And so as you say, they're feeling the impacts of climate change really at the sharp end, and so to really understand those stories, incredibly powerful. And also you've spoken about the power of regenerative organic cotton farming just earlier. Maybe we'll return to that if we have some time to wrap up later, but thank you so much, Kwan. I'd like to turn to Vittoria now from Clerici and from Como in Italy. Amazing. So wonderful to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So just to kick off, if you could just give us an overview of Clerici aims to be a fully environmentally positive company, and you have a wonderful sustainability report as well that you put together about your aims and all of the amazing history also of Clerici, because you're a silk specialist, but not only working in that particular fiber. But if you could just give us an overview of the aims of Clerici regarding environmental practices.
Correct. So Clerici Tessuto is a company which is 100 years old. And right, we started, our main business is in silk department, but we spread on all the fibers, and we cover the market from the luxury with Kering brands and till fast fashion, till H&M or the other. So we are experience the different reaction of the market towards the sustainability. And at the moment, I can state that all the people from all the segments are keen of this new wave of living and of the new way of living the fashion. Therefore, our engagement started in 2016, and we launched our completely sustainability strategy because we were aware of our position in the market and our position towards the fashion, because our position, if you want, it's a kind of strange. We have the yarn supplier, the yarn producer, and we are in the middle because we weave, we print, we finish, we make the yarn transforming in a fabric. So we have to check all the supply chain, starting from the warm, if you want, and for the other fibers, till the fabric going out from our companies. Therefore, the first part is completely checked by the certification we got. Therefore, on silk, for example, we are GOTS certified. Therefore, we are sure that all the supply chain till the receiving of the yarn is fully in compliance with the rules. So it's quite complicated because, and then we have our customers. We must certify to our customer that the product they buy from Clerici Tessuto are certified. So we have all the traceability. We have to, because the customer needs, so all the traceability of our companies, of our processes. So it's an investment which is 360 degree, because we are in the middle. I mean, from the soil, from the worm, from the plantation up to the yarn, transformation the yarn in fabric, and demonstrate to the final consumer, for us is the customer, that all the supply chain is certified. Therefore, it's a quite huge investment we have launched in the last 4 years. And Kering Group is one of the most important, because I know that Kering was one of the first brand and group moving towards certification, towards a particular sensibility to this kind of problem. After all, we are in this planet, therefore we have to preserve, we have to think to the future generation, because it's true, we live the present, but we have to discover the future, to assure a future. And the past is not enough, so we have to try to melt every day what is the past, which is the know-how of our history, towards the future. So it's quite a really huge engagement.
And very, very complex, but it's very heartening to hear, you know, that from your experience, all of your customers now are kind of switched on, because in all of our work, I think, you know, your work away, you feel like you've been working away for several years, but the implementation has been the problem. It's whether, you know, companies are receptive, but then it's about the drive. And as you say, it takes so much investment and so much work to get to this stage where we're actually in a regenerative stage instead of just a sustaining what we've already done stage. So I think this is it's really interesting to hear from your experiences. Now, also, I do know, this is just a little aside, and it's not specifically about regenerative agriculture, but I do know that you have a partnership with Parley. So cleaning up the oceans, when we're talking about biodiversity in general, it does play a part as well. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you made a decision, because you're very well known for silk, but why you made a decision to work with cleaning up the ocean fiber.
Yeah, so this is strictly connected to the fact that silk is our beginning, but since a lot of years, our collection includes a lot of other fibers. So we have polyamide, we have a polyester, we have viscose, and each of these fiber is strictly connected to the sustainability. Therefore, we have a viscose. Viscose is FSC certified. And we are dealing now with canopy as well, which is a more more strict than FSG. Then we have Evo, which is originally coming from castor oil fiber, which coming out from plantation with castor oil. So we touched every fibers, and every fibers is connected to sustainability. And partly for us is a new challenge. Therefore, I mean, for the polyester, and the polyester is not more considered a poor fiber. Even the big brands use this kind of qualities. And it's something which is sometimes more expensive or more sophisticated than silk. Therefore, it's completely changing of mind and changing of attitude to this kind of fibers. And you want that these fibers become our state of mind, a new state of mind. I mean, in each fibers, we are engaged to make them sustainable. And what best than Parley? We had a contact in Parley a couple of years ago in Paris while Premier Vision, and we found that this organization is something which is very concrete. I mean, they do, because in this area, in this sustainability thought, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of concepts that is something concrete, which give the possibility to see the waste turn in something that can still be used. So recycling, the life, LCA, and the engagement of the people to do something. So Parley is a challenge. So we already realized some fabric with Parley yarns. I mean, with yarns coming out from the waste. And every time we see something made with this fabric, we feel relieved. So because we see there is something we are doing for our planet. And there is a lot of big brands which are interesting too. So we are contacted for the main customers asking for development. And so we are dealing, we are transforming, we receive the yarns, and then we have to twist, to spin, and to develop fabric which are completely like the fabric I have on my shoulder. And this is very important because we don't split anymore, we don't not divide anymore, which is sustainable and not sustainable in our company or in our collection. We want they to be melted. So whatever you see, whatever you wish, we are here to be developed in a sustainable way as well. So it's not an tool, as was at the very beginning, it's just a new philosophy. Let's say sustainable has to be part of our attitude. This is our challenge, and Parley is helping us in this to be known.
In this particular fiber category. Amazing, fantastic. Thank you so much, Vittoria. So we'll turn to Hannes now. Hi, Hannes, welcome. You have actually produced a fiber from the ground up and a material from that fiber. Now, the raw material source for Bananatex has got a long history as a useful fiber. Can you tell us about how you came to discover that in your search for an optimum sustainable material for your product range for Question?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here on this great panel. Yeah, in fact, we, I guess, came from a different perspective. We are an accessories bag brand based in Zurich, Switzerland, and called Question. And we started in 2008, and we decided to only work with natural fibers. So at that time, with small quantities, we were working with cotton, and then about 10 years ago, we developed our own organic cotton high-density canvas because we were not 100% happy with what we could purchase in the market. And from that point onwards, we kept searching for better alternatives. We all know about the issues with cotton. We all know organic cotton is much better, but still has its own challenges, I would say. And we try to find a way that is actually circular, because sustainability per definition is something you can repeat indefinitely, and that is circularity. So we try to find a fiber that has the properties that we needed. For bags, obviously you need something that is resilient and has a high tearing resistance. And also we needed to find a fiber that is close to our existing supply chain, which is in Asia. So something that would probably be hemp in Europe has been known, similar to that has been known, the banana fiber in Asian countries. So basically this is where the journey started. And we then discovered that there's a long history for that banana fiber. It's actually the plant is called Musa textilis. It is a banana plant that produces bananas, but it's not the kind we buy in a supermarket. It is known for the fiber, and people have extracted the fiber for sturdy products, for ropes, for the shipping industry, for example, because of the high resistance of it. And we tried to find a way to manufacture it into a fine yarn so we can make a technical fabric. That was the whole journey. We started with this 4 years ago, and we launched the first products last year. For us, it turned out really well, and therefore we decided to open this up to other brands and companies and offer the material and the innovation to everyone who is interested. And this was quite an overwhelming experience for us. So we had to make a strategic decision. We have split up and created a second company for that, so we can keep our focus on our bags and still can give Bananatex the potential it needs. Coming back to your question, the plant is called Abaca on the Philippines. This is where we source our material, and it grows in a permaculture environment. One of the major benefits that we saw in this concept, meaning it grows well in an environment with different other plants. It needs dense shadow, so there must be different trees that enables our plant to grow well. We do not harvest the plant, we just harvest side stalks every year. The plant is, Abaca has very strong roots, so it is used to reforest former rainforest areas. Almost 80% of all rainforests on the Philippines have been destroyed. So it can contribute to the reforestation, to prevent erosion, and it gives quite a steady income to local communities and farmers. So the ecological aspect as well as the social aspect was a real upside for us, and the reason to go in that direction.
Amazing. So it's a pretty powerful plant then, when you talk about its relationship with other plants around it. It's sort of, I suppose it's a very pro biodiversity situation that your material source is grown in, which is amazing. Can you tell us also about the partnerships that you have with communities when you're talking about harvesting the actual fiber?
Yeah, so the communities at the moment are small communities, farming families, but lots of them all over the Philippines, because of the heritage of the textile. It still is used in big amounts for the paper industry. Just as an example, the majority of all tea bags worldwide have that fiber, because it's so tearing resistant even if it gets wet. So there are lots of small communities who harvest on a regular basis and have no intention in taking down the wood, because the plant, as it keeps growing, is in a way profitable for them, and that is actually a very good element in reforestation programs. We have now started to work with a partner who gives the opportunity to brands to reinvest their CO2 compensation capital into reforest areas that had been rainforest formerly. So they enable farmers to buy land, and they give them the security of taking off their textiles, their fibers, I mean, and their products, so they have security on a long-term horizon. And this permanence is an important element too, because as I said before, no one would take this permaculture down again if it keeps on growing and keeps on being profitable for their business.
Absolutely. So it's got a really, again, 360-degree kind of positive impact, both for ecosystems and communities as well. And you mentioned before that you're currently working on an LCA for Bananatex. Can you tell us how you're going about that and how it's going?
Yeah. Well, we did never focus on certifications, because we were involved in every step of the supply chain, so we knew what's going on and we knew what the standards were. But now, giving the fabric to other brands, they just as Vittoria just explained, they obviously ask for certifications. So we decided to start with that process. Luckily, we met Claudia from Eco Intelligent Growth in London at your expo. Yeah. And quite recently we started this process to do a cradle-to-cradle certification as well as an LCA. Well, it is something we never did before, so it's an interesting experience. It is for sure a very complex topic. Sustainability is very complex. There's no black and white, and after diving into it, I think there are quite a lot of certifications that must be questioned, to be really honest, and it's already a challenge to find the right certifications that you want to go for. But it's going to be a process that will keep us busy for a few more months, and yeah, but we're happy that we started it. It gives transparency to others, and of course there are learnings for ourselves as well. In terms of details, CO2, water, all the aspects that are part of this.
Fantastic. And I think at Sustainable Angle, we would love to map your journey once you're done with it. I think it would be provide a great exemplar for other organizations and brands who want to go about that process. So, I'm really looking forward to learning more when you've finally wrapped up the whole life cycle analysis. I think it's going to be super, super fascinating. So I realize that we're over time already, because all of your stories have been so fascinating. So on behalf of Sustainable Angle, I cannot thank you all enough for bringing all your stories direct from the field and from real practice. I think these are the most powerful ways of communicating sustainable principles and the power of regenerative practices as well. So thank you all again for being here, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice being here.
Bye-bye.